Have you ever heard of the concept of safe horny? It's a relatively new term, first used on Twitter on April 3rd, 2023. Overwatch 2's newest support hero at the time, Lifeweaver, was just announced. Polygon wrote this article about the character. Overwatch 2's next support hero has been revealed and confirmed to be hot. The attached image shows a brown-skinned man with fabulous hair and an open robe revealing his chiseled chest. This guy is entirely cut from the cloth of 90s anime Bishonen characters. Joe Longballs on Twitter replied to the article saying they got a safe horny hero out in Poly to talk about him. They must have ran over an employee in the parking lot this time. The joke is, every time Blizzard gets into a bit of legal trouble or a new story comes out of the company about sexual harassment or bullying, they respond by announcing a new gay or trans or non-binary or whatever the fuck character in Overwatch. Or they announce that an old character has also been secretly gay or trans or non-binary this whole time. Of course, Polygon and other games journalist outlets have no shortage of articles condemning straight men, or gamers, or really anybody who's not protected by progressivism as being objectifying. The male gaze is an oppressive force hovering over gaming, and if you like characters with fat tits or something, you're a misogynist. Which is why it's so strange that they focus on Lifeweaver's attractiveness. Is this also not objectifying? Is this not also the female gaze, or the gay man's gaze, or whatever? That's why it's called safe horny. This is a type of attraction you're allowed to show in public, unashamedly, by progressive standards. Your sexuality is bad and oppressive. Their sexuality is good and empowering. The interesting thing about language and human cognition is that as soon as somebody coins a phrase for a phenomenon that intuitively makes sense, immediately other concepts and examples start to come into focus. It was always kind of strange that back when Resident Evil Village launched in 2021, leftoids were publicly drooling over the 8-foot-tall Dommy Mommy that is Lady Dimitrescu. I don't know how to pronounce that. Isn't this sexually objectifying a female character? But now it makes sense. It's safe horny. Same thing with the reaction to Ganondorf's muscle-bound samurai redesign in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, or the reaction to Ryu's beard in Street Fighter VI. Now that we have a term for this behavior, safe horny, it becomes a lot easier to understand. And seeing how safe horny works with trans characters actually reveals some additional information. In my previous video, the one about how Link from Legend of Zelda is often reimagined as gay or trans by progressive fans who demand representation in a series and from a company that doesn't really care about that concept, I made the point that a lot of arguments used to declare characters as gay or trans appeals to stereotypes that, if they were invoked by anybody other than progressives, would be considered bigoted. An old stereotype about trans people is that trans women and male crossdressers are the same thing. They're not, because trans women experience gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness with symptoms and legitimate suffering. The best treatment for which that we've discovered so far is the transition. Meanwhile, crossdressers are people who have a fetish for dressing up in the other gender's clothing. It gets them off to dress up in clothes that specifically are not suited for them, that it is taboo for them to wear. An old stereotype about trans women is that they're both cross-dressers and gay men. But not all gay men actually cross-dress. And as far as I know, simply being attracted to the same sex doesn't come with dysphoria. So, by the progressive standard, conflating cross-dressers with trans women is transphobic. And yet, when Link in Breath of the Wild, or Cloud in Final Fantasy VII, dress as women in order to infiltrate female-only spaces, the all-women city of the Gerudo and Don Corneo's brothel, respectively, this is considered evidence by progressive fans that those characters are actually trans. They're not even cross-dressing as a fetish, they're doing it out of necessity. This essentially shows the nature of these one-sided rules. If a progressive looks at a cross-dressing male and declares them trans, that's empowering and positive representation. If anybody else looks at a cross-dressing male and declares them trans, that's bigoted and transphobic. One of the rules of safe horny seems to be that if your politics are correct, then the use of normally offensive stereotypes in the creation of safe horny is actually okay. According to the progressive lens, it's not bigoted if the right person with the right beliefs does the same damn thing that any bigot would do. Being the old man that I am, I remember the progressive reaction to Dragon's Crown, a 2013 PlayStation 3 game. The sorceress class in that game is a big-boobed anime woman, and game journalists at the time collectively lost their fucking minds over it. The thing is, though, this is actually the art style of Dragon's Crown. The other characters are also hyper-exaggerated. The elf is a lolly with giga-thick thighs. The fighter has about 80% of his body mass in his chest and shoulders, and the dwarf is just a fucking brick. The only halfway normal-looking character is the wizard, who still has some weirdly long limbs. In general, the art of Dragon's Crown is specifically meant to be grotesque caricatures, but 2013's progressives focused mainly on the sorceress because of her tits, and a little on Amazon because of her ass. Compare that to the progressive response to objectified or objectifiable female characters today. What changed? Is it that progressives have themselves become less puritanical? Maybe, but I don't think so. Is it because, now that there's more progressives in the gaming space, now that the space has the correct politics, they're free to objectify because their desires are good and yours are bad? Bingo. Now, some people online believe that the safe horny phenomenon isn't necessarily related to politics, but more to the idea that characters that are less traditionally sexualized are actually more sexualizable. Lady Dommy Mommy from before doesn't wear traditionally sexy clothing, so she can be made more sexual by progressives. But characters that are more overtly sexual themselves, like Sorceress, they're objectifying. This also explains Link and Cloud's cross-dressing reaction too, but I'm not entirely sure this explanation's accurate. I mean, it's probably partially accurate, but I also think that you cannot ignore the political variable, where the same sexualization is empowering by progs and objectifying by non-progs. And there's two reasons why I think you can't ignore the politics. Firstly, it's very easy to just take a quick look at the types of accounts that do this sort of canceling. My friend V got in trouble for this tweet recently. I am willing to pay $90 for this. Why won't you take my cash, Western Corporation? Sorry, I can't do a Romanian accent. The left picture is of the ugly Fable girl, and the right picture is what gamers apparently actually want. Progressives immediately brigaded V for desiring sexualized, attractive women in video games, saying that gamers are still misogynists, or that porn has rotted their brains, or whatever. And yet, checking out the likes tab of all of these accounts shows that each and every single one of them has no problem with lewd content. Just like how Republican politicians commonly have secret stashes of gay or trans porn, puritanical progressives who love to police the male gaze have no problem beating the meat to their selection of safe horny content. Modern progs claim to be the most sexually permissible group humanity's ever seen, and yet they still demand that anything sexual that they specifically don't approve of is censored. The second reason has to do with a concept related to safe horny, called safe edgy. In fact, it seems accurate to consider safe horny to be a subset of safe edgy. You ever see those jokes about the British or the French, or more broadly, white people in general, that if they were made about some non-European ethnicity would be considered totally unacceptable? That is safe edgy. It sounds like you're saying something edgy, like you're really sticking your neck out there with this hot take, but it's actually the easiest fucking thing you can say, and you have no risk of actually receiving any blowback from it. The Safe Edgy starter pack went viral in 2022, and it pretty much has the whole thing wrapped up into one neat package. Safe edgy people are overwhelmingly leftists who still believe that they are the cultural underdog, despite the fact that corporations parrot their positions, organizations promote their ideas, major talking heads show open support for their movements, and disagreeing with their politics in public is a cancelable offense. Probably the most telling example of safe edgy is Satanism in 2023. Satanism, the modern-day satanic temple thing, came about primarily as a way for punks to fuck with pearl-clutching Christians 50 years ago, and that's a job it did pretty well. It was actually edgy back then. But now? Do people still genuinely believe the satanic temple is edgy in 2023? Check this cringe shit out. I had a blast at the satanic temple today. Blessed be and hail thyself. I did not know they let you snuggle up to Baphomet for selfies. Yep, when you go up to the front door and wait for someone to come out to check your vaccination card and give you masks, then he lets you in and goes over the rules. Sitting on Baphomet is allowed and even encouraged. Oh wow, you're really pushing the fucking boundaries here. If you wanted to really be edgy, maybe you should try to actually remove the mask and see what happens. To truly be edgy, to actually be the underdog, means that society by and large has to reject your ideas and exclude you from participation in it for holding those ideas. For example, during COVID, being edgy meant not wearing a mask and not getting vaccinated. Now, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm saying that going against the grain means that you specifically do not do what the majority of people around you do. You don't listen to the advice of normative institutions demanding that you must do something. Being edgy doesn't mean being compliant. When there's a pride flag on every street corner, gay people aren't edgy anymore, they're normal. And that's why you see Gen Z teens sometimes rebel against pride stuff in schools. Not because they've been groomed to be Nazis, whatever dumb fuck nonsense the progs say, but because teens are naturally rebellious against the order that adults have set up, as a part of their exploratory phase of their development. If the world around them is pro-queer, then they will be anti-queer, at least superficially, simply to experience what it's like. And, of course, whenever you confront people who are safe edgy about their LARPing, they immediately transform into snowflakes. You can find progs all over the place saying that cis white males, they're so fragile, they're angry about everything, white male rage. But the minute that you drop an N-bomb, they collapse into a screeching pile of blubber. They cannot actually tolerate the existence of truly edgy stuff because it puts on display how safe their positions actually are. They want the clout of being the counterculture without actually being on the outside because they are the institutions, they are the source of normative principles now. This is partially what I was getting at when I made my Conservatism is the Counterculture video years ago, which funnily enough was Vosh's first exposure to my content. Like the brainlet he is, he believes that I was actually saying conservatism is punk rock because that was the gateway metaphor I used. And I still occasionally hear screams from his fan base about it. Good times. There's a lot of different intersecting principles here. The idea of trolls remorse, that a lot of the people who are now safe edgy or safe horny also used to be actually edgy. And by actually edgy, I mean they used to watch iDubbbz videos in what they now call their alt-right pipeline phase, something they feel like they have to be publicly remorseful for. There's also the nature of power, what is gained by claiming something as the normative position around which other modes of thought deviate from, while also understanding that the outsider position from that normative center brings with it its own benefits. There's also the idea of freedom itself. What does it mean to be free in the face of the concept of safety? Being safe brings with it a degree of freedom, since you don't need to worry about outside interference as much. But the mechanisms that secure that safety can also stifle freedom. If you're free from safety, is that liberating or endangering? Is it both? Each of these ideas are deserving of their own video, so I'll be doing them as follow-ups. But insofar as this conversation goes, the main reason this video isn't an indefensible, despite a huge chunk of the safe horny stuff revolving around video games, is because progressives also do this to real-life people. Here's Elon Musk liking a post by the redheaded libertarian, who is an attractive young woman. The post is a meme about Elliot Page, replacing the Protect Trans Kids shirt with Sterilize Autistic Kids. Hassan replied to this by saying Elon is autistic and he has a trans kid, but he's such a horny reply guy that he forgot. Hold on a minute, we're living in the progressive, sex-positive, empowering future, right? What is exactly wrong with being a horny reply guy? Every single bread tuber and progressive on the fucking platform posts ooh woo, I am respectfully looking with sweating emojis underneath every single 5 out of 10 OnlyFans art hoe, while Hassan himself has flown to Europe to fuck sex slaves held in a brothel. This is fundamentally why I don't think it's about the left becoming less puritanical over time, but it is at its core a political conversation. To the progs, leftist sexuality good, non-leftist sexuality bad, simple as. They make fun of trad wives and monogamy and people who want that lifestyle or engage with those communities because it's not a form of sexuality that they politically approve of. This whole discussion is an outgrowth of the choice feminism stuff from the 2010s. Choice feminism posited that the feminist project is fulfilled if women have the choice to do what they want. If individual women choose to be trad wives and homemakers instead of being sexually promiscuous because they actually want that, then it's still a feminist act because it's the agency of women that ultimately matters. Radical feminism rejects this idea because, in their view, it does nothing to actually liberate women as a class, to the point that individual women who choose more traditional lifestyles are traitors to feminism. This is the everything is political, even your personal choices view that my Gramsci video went into detail about. If you're a true revolutionary, then you have an obligation to make revolutionary choices, even if that's not what you personally want. And every time a choice feminist promotes a more traditional lifestyle, they set the feminist movement back because other women might be influenced by their happiness and fulfilled life to also abandon being a revolutionary. Unsurprisingly, by 2023, in the face of the left's ongoing radicalization, choice feminism is pretty much non-existent among progressives, due to it being too liberal, too individualistic, and too bourgeois. The radfem critique of it is that because it doesn't institutionally challenge the status quo, because it carves out a private domain where politics don't apply, because it gives women the choice to not be a revolutionary if that's in their heart, it is ultimately reactionary. In any case, what's at the bottom of all of this is that human sexuality is fun, and being edgy is fun too. Everybody enjoys feeling like they've left the safe, known bounds of what their culture considers acceptable, and they're now out in the wilderness, in the uncharted lands. Everybody knows what it feels like when the call of exploration and adventure beckons, even only if in terms of thoughts or speech. Everyone knows the thrill of doing or saying or even thinking something considered taboo. But the moral foundations of the progressive are overwhelmingly preoccupied with safety, to the point that they seek to kill any sort of true exploratory impulse. Care harm over everything else, in Haidt's terms. On the internet, it's pretty easy to keep up the safety LARP, where progressives pretend that they're on the edge when they're actually not. At least it was for a while. But like with the Hassan example earlier, it all falls apart once you look at what people actually do in real life. Right now, progressive logic dictates that sex is simultaneously so safe and so fun and ultimately so inconsequential that you can have it with anyone you like, anytime you like, and any restriction on any sexuality whatsoever is oppressive, to the point that twerking in front of kids at pride parades is just harmless fun and hurts no one, while at the exact same time, sex is so dangerous and so potentially damaging that you need constant reaffirmation of consent, signed across multiple forms and filed away with the campus security office before you even ask a girl out, because the slightest wrong move is so traumatizing to your partner that you're a rapist and should absolutely be fired and cancelled and drummed out of polite society. These two ideas just don't fit together. A guy shooting his shot, getting rejected, and then leaving the girl alone means that that girl was traumatized or microaggressed or stare raped, or whatever the fuck, is a sexual moral code that does not allow for free love and open, consequence-free sexuality. Unless the progressive goal isn't actually sexual liberation. It is to use sexuality as a method by which they control their political enemies, which, by the way, is what a lot of ruling classes have done across human history. That is what safe horny really means. They're allowed to simp and drool under every OnlyFans Thoughts page because they vote for pro-sex work policies. But if you do it, you're a male-gazing misogynist. They can create sexual content for others to enjoy because the big boobs that they draw are empowering women with that body type. But if you do it, you're oppressing those women through objectification and playing into stereotypes. They can fuck prostitutes because they've read theory about the political dynamics of prostitution. But if you do it, you're an enabler of sex trafficking. Safe horny simply describes the moral license to be sexual in the midst of progressive puritanism. Safe edgy fundamentally works the same way. They spend so much time inventing slurs for white people, and they're all like water rolling off a duck's back. But one slur for black people, and they instantly lose their minds. And by the way, that is how you combat all of this. If they complain that your sexuality is objectifying, just say, yes, it is. Yes, I will objectify. Yes, I will trigger you with slurs. Fuck them. If they're gonna play this one-sided game, I'm more than willing to force it to be equal. Crying to them about how it's not fair is simply accepting that you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. So it's far better to simply say to them, yes, I'm going to do everything you do. And no, I don't care if you approve of it or not. I don't need to take your moral judgment into consideration because you are immoral.